Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Kilo Talk podcast. We have two great guests today. We are thankful enough to be joined by Seth, Todd, and Dillan Berryman from the Mississippi State Powerlifting Club. So we're going to jump into some more collegiate powerlifting and then also spend some time talking about Daniel Bell's performance this weekend at the Pioneer Open. So why don't we go ahead and get things started off? Each of you can kind of step in, talk about a little bit about your own powerlifting, kind of how you got started in powerlifting and where you want to go forward. So Seth, you want to go ahead and kick us off here?
Yeah, man, I got you. First off, appreciate it, guys, for allowing me to come on the show. Been pretty excited about it. My name's Seth Todd. I'll be a sophomore at Mississippi State University in industrial engineering this year. I powerlifted my junior year of high school. I was up in the 275 class back then. And I was kind of decently strong. I made it through the regionals in the north half, but I never got any further than that. And then I didn't powerlift again until this past year, my freshman year. And I ended up doing a meet in the fall and then a meet in the spring. Both of those went really well. Dillan here, he was actually acted as my coach. Freshman year, I jumped into the gear, and he helped me a lot with it. I probably wouldn't be where I am without him and his help. But I had two great 9-for-9 meets. I added 160 pounds to my total from November to February, and then was set to compete at the College Gate Nationals in Pennsylvania. A month out, I hurt myself deadlifting for the third time, and I wasn't able to go, but wouldn't have been able to go anyway because of all the COVID stuff. So it's probably a good thing it got canceled anyway. I just had time to rest up and heal.
But yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any idea on what you're looking at for your next meet, or are you going to kind of wait till the COVID blows over a little bit?
Right now I'm planning on, there's a school, Blue Mountain up in East Mississippi, and they should be having a meet in around November that I plan on doing. And because for this year, I kind of just said I'm not going to worry about the college nats. It's in Baton Rouge next year, which is a lot closer to us. So I'm just going to try to hit the November meet, get a good qualifying total, and then head down to Baton Rouge next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't realize you were an IE student. I recently graduated WU with a degree in industrial engineering, so that's pretty
awesome,
cool.
Man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So Dillan, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm actually this will be my 5th year at State. I'm a mechanical engineering student here, and kind of the same way as Seth, I started powerlifting my junior year, kind of just as a way to get better, a little bit bigger for football, because I was 140 pounds soaking wet at the time. Didn't really have good coaching at my school. We had a couple studs on the team, and that's kind of where the priority went. So I kind of took time off, lifted just whenever, and got back into it my sophomore year once I found out State had a team, and just kind of got started since then and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are you looking at for the future, meet-wise?
So I took this last year off. I did something weird to my knee at my last meet in September. And just because Collegians was in Pennsylvania, I didn't really feel the need to go that far. So everywhere I go, my wife goes. So it would have been a really expensive trip for both of us.
Yeah.
And I decided it'd just be better to take a year off and kind of rehab my knee a little bit and build my raw total up. And I actually ended up deciding to go up a weight class because I was tired of being beat up all the time. And so I plan on competing again in September and then finishing up my last year at State and going to collegiates, hopefully in April.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you compete in single ply as well?
Yeah, that's where I got started at and just haven't left since.
Yeah, we've actually heard a lot about that from speaking with some of the other people we've had in the podcast that live down south around Texas or in that area. They all compete a lot of single ply, which is like very different from here because for the most part it's like strictly raw, and most of like our local area, but raw or raw with wraps. So it's kind of cool to hear some other people's perspective and what they experience with that. So before we jump into your specific school stuff, we kind of had some real powerlifting yesterday, which I thought was pretty cool. And Daniel Bell came back out, and he did not reset his world record total in reps, but he was the second guy ever to squat 1,000 pounds and pull 900 pounds in one meet. And really just an awesome showing. I watched all the videos. I mean, real good. His squats are all to depth, his form. It wasn't like it was a sketchy lift or anything like that you see sometimes, and very impressive. What's your guys' thoughts on this?
I guess I'll go ahead and jump in. Yeah, looking at his stats, he's had the 1,000+ squats for about 3 years, but he's been chasing that 900+ deadlift. He's tried it a couple times, it looks like, and has also been working on that for about 3 years. So he's been putting in a lot of work for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm super impressed with him. I mean, he's a guy that's been around forever kind of in the scene, but he's really turned it on the past couple of years. I think he works with Trevor Jaffrey, I want to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, that's what seems like anyone that works with him ends up with all kinds of improvements. So I'm glad to see him kind of step up and really get some. I'm glad the world record total is back in the U.S. from taken from Milanichev. So it's pretty cool.
So I think,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Something that is kind of overlooked right now is how often Daniel Bell actually competes, which is insane to me. So he did the tribute last August. Then he did the American Barbell Club Open in November, 3 months later, maybe 3.5 months later, where he took that rep total. Then he did a meet in February, 3 months later. Then now in July, he's also did another full power meet. And for someone that big, pushing that kind of numbers, I mean, competing, 4 times in a year is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think a lot of times, especially when you look towards like the real big numbers, a lot of lifters get in their head that they can't compete like multiple times a year, and he really has kind of broke the stereotypical mold on this. And I agree. I think this is something I'd like to see more lifters start to do. I know personally, the more I compete, as long as have enough time to heal between meets, the more frequently I repeat or compete, the better I do. So I don't know. It's something to kind of look at, and it's definitely different from what we see a lot of times.
Yeah, I was listening.
Go ahead, Dylan.
I was listening to somebody actually talk about that the other day. That's you've got a lot of lifters in Britain that kind of take that model. Most of them are single ply, so it's a little bit easier on the joints. But you've got some lifters there that compete 8 times a year, just under the thought process of it's a little, you can train all day, but a meet's a different kind of skill set. You've got to get used to listening to commands, and I think that's something people take for granted a lot of times. Is that's still stuff you really do have to practice.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not like you can just, we can all have our buddies give us commands in the gym or whatnot, but I don't know about you guys, but personally, it's a completely different atmosphere when you get out on the platform. And that's what most of the young lifters, their first couple of meets, that's the stuff they miss. So that's why I like the idea of trying to compete a little bit more. And I mean, if the guy with the heaviest total in the world can do it, I think we can all take a little bit of look at that and probably do it ourselves as well.
Also, I generally believe, because I know a few people that will say like, oh, I want to make sure I can, put up a good total PR, or I won't compete until I break a record, or I won't compete again until, X happens or whatever. And going back to what you guys said, that just really, I think it shoots you in the foot a little bit, because there is an art to competing, and there is a little bit of an art to kind of adjusting for those like different meet day things that could go wrong and everything. So by just looking at, putting up a good total based on what you can do in the gym, I also think you're missing out on learning how to actually compete and adapt in a meet day environment, especially if you're doing, like, let's say, a national level meet.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what goes on with him and what else he can still accomplish. I'm sure he still has a very long career ahead of him. So, but let's go ahead and jump into Mississippi State Powerlifting Club. So this is Seth has always been very active as far as like asking questions about when we did polls and stuff for the podcast. And so we really wanted to get him on to kind of talk about him and Dillan as well about what their club kind of goes through, how it got started, and really just see if we can shed some insight to some other collegiate powerlifting clubs out there. So why don't we go ahead and just get started by a simple question: is how long has the club been around for you guys?
You can go ahead and get this one, Dillan.
Yeah. So the club has actually been around only since 2016. Our first president who started it, he's actually coaching at Blue Mountain now, and it started off pretty rough to say the least. He actually worked for the school as well, just in our rec center, and he didn't get along with the people who were in charge of the rec center. So we had a lot of trouble with them hating us at first, just because they associated everybody else. And then they kind of just, because the club started off as all single ply, and some of the people didn't really get what that was all about, or, why these guys were walking around in suits and why people were rapping and, just different kind of things. But that's when it started. It was 2016. And I think we only had 6-7 members to start off with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because that's a real common theme with everyone we talk to and all these different powerlifting programs. It's just for some reason powerlifting is not accepted in a lot of our recreational centers and some of the college university like resources, and it's very hard to kind of get the buy-in from the school because of that. And it's almost like people look at you like you're an outlier when you're really building a very strong community for everyone in the university. So it's definitely something we hear a lot of.
It's interesting you guys bring that up too, with your history of the club being a small group of single ply lifters that no one really understood, because, and Wes can correct me on this because he was there, but that sounds a hell of a lot like how WVU powerlifting started as well.
Yeah, so basically I've never competed full power single ply, but when I grew up and first got my first intro to powerlifting, it was single lift bench press, single ply lifting. And it was me and our good friend and founder of the club, Matthew Maloney, that really came up to Morgantown to go to school, and we started trying to the biggest issue is we wanted to keep doing the single ply, and we were too scared to do it because he was benching like 500 pounds on the rec center benches. So basically the club started out by us trying to find like a group of people to help spot his bench press, single ply lift, and a gym that had face saver. So if something happened, he wouldn't die. But that's really how the West Virginia Powerlifting Club first got started. We did join. There was an unofficial club with a guy that I'm just going to say he basically stole everyone's money, and he still thinks he started the club, but it really wasn't a real thing. And so that's where our first step was we tried to get in with him. They had a decent facility, and then he just basically took off. So from that point, we kind of took the connections we met and kicked it off.
So it's actually kind of funny you mentioned that, because so he'll say he's the founder, then Matt will say he's the founder, but then I got a DM on our team Instagram where this guy had said, "Oh, I'm really glad that the club is still around after we started it in the mid 90s."
Oh no!
So we have these like kind of random people emerging from the bushes, so to speak, saying like, "Oh, I started this club," or "I'm glad to see this club's around since God knows how long ago."
Yeah, I'm not going to say there wasn't some word of mouth that kind of helped us get to where it was at now. But let's not kid ourselves. It was Matt Maloney, Dillan Jordan, and really I think that we first started out building the club, because that's when it was official with the school. So I don't know. I don't know. Some unofficial secret club going around, I don't think was really the start of West Virginia powerlifting. But we kind of got off on a weird tangent.
Yeah, we'll just get you all together one day, like fight to the death for the rights of who founded the club.
Yeah, we
But
might have
that's
to.
that's besides the point.
That's the
But
best way to do it.
Yeah.
100%. So you guys mentioned kind of an issue with school support because of personal politics and everything like that, and that's something that we see quite a bit. But financially, how did your club get started in that aspect, or do you guys receive any help from your school regarding that right now, or anything like that?
So this year, I actually really worked hard to build a good relationship with not only the employees at the rec center but also our club sport administrator and the administrator for the rec center. This year, we actually started to receive a lot more, I guess, verbal support, which was slowly leading into physical support because they had just actually bought a couple rigs from Rogue, some Rogue power bars. So we had pretty good equipment that we could use for the most part. And our club sport budget isn't very big. It's, they said they had like $6,000 to split up between 25 teams. And, that won't even put a dent in our budget. But I had spoken with the sports club administrator and sat down with the person who actually owned the rec center, and they were actually planning on buying us an ER rack. Not necessarily buying us an ER rack, but buying the center one. And, who else is really going to use an ER rack and kilo plates other than the powerlifting team?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome.
But unfortunately, COVID kind of canned all that and tanked their budget. So with that, didn't end up happening.
How big of a school is Mississippi State?
I think we're at 20,000 ish.
I think we're about 22,000 on campus.
Yeah.
Okay, so a pretty decent sized school. But $6,000 amongst 25 clubs is, to be quite honest, not a lot. Which really
only the top performing clubs, the most active ones and the ones who do the most community service and the ones who are the best at all of them really get the majority of that money. And then as you go down the list, it kind of gets less and less.
Yeah, and that's what's causing a lot of kind of barrier to entries into like different club sports at around, I guess, at a bunch of different schools, because at WVU they value a lot of that type of stuff, like how many people you can get involved, how successful you are as a club, and all that other stuff. But if you don't have the support when you're first starting out, how can you really have the opportunity to grow into a club that gets that kind of money?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know this is something, Seth, I think you made a comment on at one point, and we talked about a little bit on other podcasts, is like, how do you get your members to be more active? And I find that to be a very interesting topic when it comes to club sports, because I don't know about you guys, but we're like pushed into basically one of the biggest metrics they look at is how many members you have. And it's just a constant push of more members, more members, more members. And you really get caught up with that. And it's very challenging to try to grow the quality of the member you have in your team when it's like, hey, the only way I can get money is if I get 10 more members this year than I did last year. So I don't know if that's something you guys run into, but we've had that problem in the past.
Yeah, our focus this year, last year, I'd say we probably had between like 40 and 50 members sign up and pay dues. And then we had probably an average of 12 to 20 on average come to practices during the week. But this year, I think we're really trying to look at, like you said, growing the quality of the members, doing more kind of events like outside the gym, just where we can get to know each other better and kind of grow the bond that a powerlifting team should have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So go ahead, Nick.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, going back to how people have those standards and how different club sports people handle what determines a successful club, it's unfortunately just all political, It's not as much, and this is going to sound incredibly shitty, and I'm sorry, But sometimes it turns not as much into making the experience good for other people, but making sure you get on the good side of the people that give you money and kind of feed
Yeah.
you a little bit. So I remember in the few years I was an officer, the metrics in which they evaluated each club changed a few times. So it went from, okay, like the most successful clubs will have the most members, and that's how we'll do it. And then it turned into, oh, we're going off of percentage based on your practice attendance, which we're a very similar club to you in the sense that we had, I think, 55 members pay their dues this year, and maybe 15 showed up. And, that's less than 33% attendance on average, which looks really, really bad on paper. But we had grown that club to that point because the year before they said the club with the most members will probably get the most money. So it's hard to kind of change your strategy each single year to play that political game, which is quite frankly really, really annoying.
Yeah, I
So-
completely. Oh, go ahead.
That's kind of a spot where we're kind of sitting pretty at, just due to the trial and error we've had through our history. Because we started out the first year in 2016 with very few members and as a club sport. And then the next year, we took a team to collegiates that year, had somebody place third, which looks really good.
Yeah.
And then we came back and we sent a bigger team to collegiates the next year and got our club sport status revoked because of just paperwork. And that's when me and our second president took over, and we focused on kind of like y'all were talking about, playing that game and getting a lot more members, and grew the club to the 40, 45 members. And I think that's kind of influenced our direction this year, though, to work on the quality of members, because we found out really how much money they were going to give us, even if we did everything they wanted to. And that's just, it's not even worth our time to play their game. We can have 30 quality members that want to fundraise and do much, much better.
Right.
I was actually about to jump into that, where you guys obviously don't get a ton of support financially through the school. What are some opportunities that you guys have did in the past that has allowed you to fundraise? Because you kind of mentioned that. Is that something you guys spend a lot of time doing?
So this is one area where I definitely will admit that we've been pretty weak as a team. Over the years, we've had issues with officers not participating. So on average, we've had 6 officers every year, and we get about 2 that actually do their job and show up.
Yep.
So I'm sure, as y'all know, it's hard to kind of do with only 2 out of 6 members working.
Yep.
The biggest things we've done, though, is actually y'all's last episode, we've went down and spot it for Marco a couple times.
Okay.
We've done at least one of his meets, except for this last year. And that's usually a pretty good chunk of change, because Slidell is only like 4 hours away from us, so it's nothing to take 15 guys down there and spot a meet. And the big one we've always done is just t-shirts. We, usually the past couple years we've had fairly large teams going to collegiates. Last year, when it was in Ohio, I think we took 10 or 11, and that was like the minimum requirement was for everybody to sell 10 shirts. So even just that little bit, that upped our budget. That's something we've really, the new officers have been working pretty hard on, is figuring out stuff for the coming year, getting ahead of it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh, sorry, go on, Wes.
No, you're good. I wasn't going to. You're good.
Yeah. So basically, I was going to ask you guys. You mentioned growing the club to 40, 50 members. What are some things that you guys did to kind of bring your club from that single digit membership like up to that near 40, 50 membership mark? Like, was there anything? How do you guys? I don't know how to ask this question. Basically, how did you guys make the club appeal to other people who really don't know what powerlifting is?
So one big thing we did, this was the first year I was an officer. My primary job I was the VP the first year, and my whole job was to come up with programming for the entire team. And I think that was one of the biggest things that we've kind of done that's made us get a lot of members. Is we've made sure we've always had one officer whose sole job is to at least get a pretty generalized good team program together, and his sole job is to work with other members, help with even newer members, and we've been really fortunate because the guy who has that position right now, he's an exercise science major. He works for the school for the football team, so he's really good at taking people that don't know what shoe to put on first and making them able to squat and bench and stuff like that. So that's really been the big one that's I personally think has helped grow us, is we've been really available as far as to newer people who don't know how to squat, and we've taken that time from personally from our lifts to take an hour, take a session and help those guys without intimidating them and letting them lift with us necessarily, but really focusing on them like they're your personal client almost.
That's a very interesting thing that you say there, because we've been off and on the last couple of years. Like 1 year we'll have 4 officers, then it's like, oh, we got to make 2 more positions, and then so we'll have 6, and it's just like a continuous battle with that. And I do find that a lot of times we break it up and try to make too many positions to justify people not doing their job. But something we've never even thought about is having an officer, like you're saying, whose sole purpose on being an officer is based around making sure everyone is supplied with programming and knowledge to better themselves. So, and that's always an issue we talk about. It's like, should we try to do a standardized program type of thing, or like, how do we make that decision? And that's a really unique and very good idea, in my opinion, that maybe some of these schools can take note of, and maybe give yourself an officer that really just looks at that, because I think it would really help the growth for sure.
It's funny you say that too, because I was telling Wes about this, but maybe a few weeks ago I was sleeping and I had a dream that we came up with this like 16, I think it was 14-week program for once the semester starts that peaked really nicely into like our winter team meet. And that was just really weird to me because I'm no longer an officer, but I'm still somehow thinking about it to the point where I'm having really weird dreams about that kind of stuff.
It doesn't go away.
No, this is something I have to live with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's definitely well, there you go. You can get yourself another officer job since you're in school and just be the coach of the team, right?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
That's actually one of the main reasons we did that. Because my first year, I'd always had somebody program for me, so I didn't know a whole lot about it. And then I get handed this job in April and say, "Hey, you better learn, and you better learn really fast." Because our president, he kind of ran it like a business. He's like, "I want 40 people. I want 40, 50 people paying dues, and you got to deal with them, buddy." But we've been really fortunate because our actual club sports guidelines don't allow us to pay a coach.
Oh, okay. Wow.
We can pay, I think we could get away with something like hiring TSA or somebody to do group programming, but they are very nitpicky that if you have a coach, you're not supposed to pay them. It can, which, I mean, once again, we're kind of sitting in the position now wondering if we really need a lot of the school's money.
Yeah.
But it worked out pretty nice, and we've been really fortunate because we've had guys who've really been interested in that side of powerlifting and have taken it on, because it can be a really nitpicky job. You're dealing with everybody from the kid who's squatting 500 pounds to the kid who's squatting the bar. So
do you struggle with opinions when you're kind of doing when you're trying to do coaching like that, and like you have someone dedicated towards what direction that they want to bring the club for their programming? I know personally with the WVU powerlifting team, we tend to we run into arguments still with none of us not involved anymore about how why is someone doing this with their program, or why are they doing that. So I didn't know, is that something you run into as far as people get too opinionated about it, or do people usually understand, they know what they're talking about and they go with it?
So as far as the more advanced lifters, we kind of have a take it or leave it approach for them. You know, you have one guy I can think comes to mind is Caleb Meyer. He's one of our raw lifters in the 120 class, and he's a phenomenal lifter, but he doesn't do our group programming. He does Jug AI, and me and him go back and forth because I absolutely hate it. But he is an excellent lifter, and it works for him. The structured programming is really for the new guys. It, you know, because a lot of beginners, they can do pretty much anything and it's going to work. So our current team captain, me and him have had a couple conversations and kind of just gotten it as generalized as we can. And the biggest understanding he has is, hey, these new guys need to get stronger and they don't need to get hurt. And as long as we're checking those boxes, you know, for the really, you know, novice lifters, because even Seth, he did my programming this year because he was in equipment, you know, something different from the rest of the team. So that's kind of how we get by that. And or at least because I'm technically an advisor this year, I'm just helping out the new group of officers while I'm still around. But in the past, it's kind of been the understanding of, hey, this is your job. You have this job because you got elected to do so by the people who you program for. So, you know, you kind of already have that trust instilled, and you know, they don't mind talking about it. Our team captain's really, really open to just discussing, but at the end of the day, that's the way me and him have always done it. It's still his job, and as the other officer, you kind of have to back them up on it. You can't, you know, mom and dad can't fight in front of the kids.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think that'd be something more clubs should look to maybe implement in the future. So let's go ahead and jump into the 2021 or 2020 to 2021 school year. Honestly, it might be a little bit of a shit show. Who knows what's actually going to happen. But I just wanted to kind of pick your guys' brains a little bit on, like, where do you think the direction that your club is going to go during the school year, and what are some things that you think you might be able to accomplish?
Well, I think because I know for Mississippi State, they've already sent out a lot of guidelines about what needs to happen when we get back. You know, I know right now in the summer they have like 50-minute slots you have to reserve, clean every equipment before and after you use it, wear a mask. I assume they're probably going to stick with something pretty similar to that when we get back to school. I think as far as new members, the COVID stuff might produce like a decline in new membership because people are kind of wary about, you know, going to the gym and socializing with a bunch of different people. But I think as far as the members that we have from last year that were active, I think they'll still be ready to come back and get stronger and keep practicing as much as the rec will allow us to.
Yeah, definitely. I could see where there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect between you and trying to get the new members involved. Even if they would like to go to the gym, it's just you're going to have a limited amount of opportunities to kind of reach out to them. I know we have like club sports fairs and different events like that, volunteering, where we kind of get our name out, and I feel like that's going to be overall pretty challenging, but I'm still pretty optimistic, so I hope it doesn't have too much effect, but I guess we never know.
Well,
so you got
I was gonna say, I guess for us, because you guys mentioned that you work out at your school rec center, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a sticky situation because that way club sports can kind of monitor you and see what you're doing. Whereas us, we kind of have to navigate a little bit differently because we work out at a gym off campus. So if club sports comes down and says, okay, like no more club sports practices, how are we going to not even mitigate that, but how are we going to navigate that to make sure that, you know, people are following the rules and everything like that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's a lot of things that are still in limbo right now. Pretty much everywhere, um, school, state, everything. They're kind of going back and forth. So you never know what's going to happen next week. We still got a little over a month before school starts. I think a lot could happen between now and then, good or bad. But I guess we'll just have to, Dillan and I and the other officers just have to go into it with as positive a mindset as we can about growing the club and everybody getting stronger, and just see what happens, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you guys still planning to do collegiate nationals, or what is kind of your competitive schedule as a team look like year round?
So we try to push everybody to do as many meets as they can, just because as like we talked about earlier, that's more experience under your belt. That's part of powerlifting is competing. So we try to push everyone to do like one in the fall and one in the spring. Feel like that's a pretty good split between training and peaking for one, and then another training block for the next. That's kind of what I like to do, and I know Dylan's planning on competing in September, I believe. And then we'll just see. Yeah, I guess we just got to see how it plays out. I'm doing that meet in November, and then hopefully able to put up a good enough qualifying total for Nats next year.
Yeah, that meet in November, is it the rescheduled collegiate nationals?
No, I decided not to do that one. This one's going to be, hopefully, if they still have it, the Blue Mountain College meet.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, kind of just completely slipped my mind on that.
Yeah. So do you guys work with? So Mark last week mentioned the Blue Mountain, the collegiate team for Al Blue Mountain, and he said they're a recent team. We have a couple schools up here that we do a lot of stuff with during the year that kind of we'll do some like lifting together, just communication or whatnot. Is that a school that you guys are working with, like their team at all, to kind of do different things with through events or whatnot?
We haven't worked with them in the past yet, but as we've been listening to y'all's podcast, it seems like a good idea. We our officers did speak with Eddie Strickland of Auburn Powerlifting.
Okay.
Bounce some ideas back and forth. And I think something like that, just getting together with some of the other colleges, around the state and lifting with them for a day, or just talking about powerlifting back and forth. I think that would be really beneficial.
And we're pretty cool with them overall, seeing them at meets, because our first president's a coach over there. So, and their head coach, super nice guy. I've talked to him a lot back and forth, and actually a lot of the members who, it's a Mississippi-based powerlifting team. So a lot of our younger lifters go, "Hey, I went to high school with this guy who's over at Blue Mountain," or "Hey, I lifted against him in regionals." So
yeah,
not too far removed, thankfully.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you guys have not most, but do you guys have lifters come in? We had the opportunity to speak a little bit about high school last week. Do you have a lot of lifters that compete in high school, or is it kind of hit or miss on that?
I'll let you get this one, Dylan.
Sure. So in the past, when we were smaller, it was a lot of high school lifters. A lot of guys who did it and were really good in high school. We've actually had a little bit of a drop off of that as we've just kind of changed the direction of the club of trying to appeal to, getting more types of people into powerlifting, because one issue I ran into, we were talking about people being opinionated about the programming and stuff like that, is a lot of times these guys who were coming in from high school thought that the way their high school coach was doing it was the best way and the only way. And you don't really, some of them we just didn't really want around the team. It wasn't the right, especially for a beginner lifter. You get a guy who's been pretty good throughout high school. They're either going to have a really great attitude or, from my experience, a really horrible one. Most of our super competitive lifters, though, actually did do it in high school. We've got two guys who lifted at high school nationals their senior year from a little school in Mississippi, and they're both pretty good. But I would have to say, as a whole, right now, most of our lifters are 1 to 2 years of powerlifting experience. Our most is actually one of those guys who came from high school. He did it all throughout high school, so he's got 4 or 5 years now. So
Yeah.
That's awesome. Is Mississippi because I know, states like Louisiana and Texas have a very rich culture with powerlifting. Is that something that exists kind of in Mississippi too? Or I don't want to say like, are you guys kind of a new thing at Mississippi State, but what kind of culture exists in Mississippi in regards to that?
I'd say I only did a year of high school powerlifting, but I'd say it's growing. It's decently sized. There's a lot of strong guys from down around the coast. Like I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they mentioned that in Mississippi we can wear single ply squat suits, but we don't wear bench shirts. And I knew that, but it's pretty interesting if you compare it to like Louisiana and Texas. We're definitely it's not as big and popular as it is in those states. But I'd say there's some strong people coming out. Austin Perkins is actually from down south a little bit, from Mississippi.
Oh, really?
yeah, he was here my sophomore year. He actually lived at 4 State for a year.
He's in Midland now, isn't he?
Yep.
Right.
Okay, I always thought he just went to Midland straight from the get-go. I didn't know he went to Mississippi State for a little bit.
Yeah, he was here his freshman year, and he got the scholarship offer for Midland. And for somebody who absolutely loves powerlifting like Austin, it was really, for his powerlifting career, it was the best thing he could have ever done. He was an amazing lifter, but being up there with other amazing lifters has definitely propelled him up.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah. So, Nick, do you have anything else to ask them before we wrap the podcast up?
No, I think we got a pretty detailed overlook of their club today.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what you guys are doing in the future and what all you guys can accomplish. But thank you guys both for coming on the show today. So why don't you guys real quick just tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me at Seth.Todd76, SETHTODD. And then our club Instagram, MSUPL.MSState. If you keep up what's going on with Mississippi State Powerlifting there.
Yeah, and you can find me at D_BER09 or 09. But definitely check out our state page. We've been doing a lot of cool stuff there, trying to interview a lot of lifters. It's pretty cool if you want to keep up with our club in general. So
Yeah, definitely. So Nick, what about you, man?
You can find my personal Instagram at notasquid99.
Yeah, and I'm at West McKnight7. While you're on Instagram, go ahead and check out our Kilo Talk Instagram at Kilo Talk. We are now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then kind of YouTube, but I've had some issues with videos the past couple of weeks, but I'll get those caught up. So thank you again, guys, for coming on the show, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks guys for the opportunity. Awesome talking to y'all.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
thanks for having us on.